our first doctor on the show.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right, no pressure. The medication is just putting us essentially on a level playing field. It's not cheating, it's medication for a medical condition.
I think something that we can all be aware of is how we talk about body diversity.
Why is no one complimenting me? But there was...
Very millennial of you.
Exactly, yes.
Welcome to What's the Difference, the Woolworths podcast where we talk trends, tools, and also have tricky conversations that shape how we live, eat, and shop. My name is Smongile Mafu.
And I'm Steve Steinfeld. And Sibs, today's topic is an interesting one, and it's also a sensitive one. We'll be talking about GLP-1 medication, like Ozempic, and how it's changed our relationship with food.
And we are not alone, because if we did this alone, I don't know if there'd be another episode. So we've brought the big guns. To help us navigate this very tricky subject, we're joined by Dr. Robyn Milton, who has a special interest in hormonal health and metabolism. Dr. Robyn has seen how GLP-1 agonists have altered the lives of her patients and how they're influencing food choices, how we shop, how we eat, as well as body image, all also linked to how we talk about fat phobia. And the official line that our legal team asked us to say, our guest today is a medical doctor who is joining us in her personal capacity. She has no financial or other affiliation with any pharmaceutical company in relation to this conversation. Her comments are general in nature and are not a substitute for medical advice. Please consult your own healthcare professional for guidance tailored to you. So, Doc, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. It's our first doctor on the show.
I know.
Yeah. All right, no pressure.
And Steve was so worried about talking about the subject, but I was worried as well because it's a conversation.
Steve is always worried. So if Sibs is worried, then...
Yeah, then Steve is worried. But I'm so glad we have you because this is a conversation that I'm having with my friends all the time and people are having in their different communities.
Yeah.
So to break the ice, so everyone can kind of chill, I've brought some special snacks for you, Doc. I don't know what you're enjoying at the moment, but we've been living on biltong. So we've got the free-range smoked sliced beef biltong.
Very nice.
Which is always yummy. We've got some lentil chips here, the sour cream and chives flavor, and we've also got the barbecue flavor of the quinoa chips. You're looking at the biltong?
Yeah,
Shall you be honest? Okay,
100%. All
you
right.
may.
Thank you very much.
So we've been having a lot of biltong, Sibs, but I think this is our first smoked biltong.
Yeah, it looks very flavorful just through the bag.
Just from what you can tell.
Hey, how did you enjoy that?
That's good.
Yeah?
Smoky?
I think so.
You know, my favorite thing is reading the back of the packet and seeing the magic of copywriting.
Yes.
Free-range cattle roam and graze freely and are never given routine antibiotics or growth promoters. Our biltong is made using a traditional South African recipe. This mildly spiced and lightly oak-smoked biltong has a rich, meaty flavor with subtle smoke undertones.
There we go.
It's like reading the back of a wine bottle.
So actually, I get the smoky undertones are at the end.
Yes.
Like I can taste that then. Yeah,
So
it's very
accurate.
nice.
Give it a
No, it's
try.
very nice. I must admit that is my sort of daily snack that I keep in my drawer in my desk. I always have one of the big bulk buys of the biltong there for me. So yeah.
And your days as a doc, I'm sure, are very long as well. When it is a very long day, how do you kind of manage the snacking and, you know, making sure you take care of yourself?
That's a really good question. And I think the way that I have finally managed to do that, because it's taken a long time to get there. I used to be one of those people who would sort of get out of bed, get dressed, get straight to work, and then realize it was 3 p.m. and I hadn't eaten or hadn't had anything to drink, and suddenly wondering why I'm so grumpy and irritated with everybody.
Yes.
And realize that was not sustainable. So now, very important is that I eat before I leave the house. Because even if I take something with me, like a protein shake in the car, it will get left in the car.
Are you good with the lunchbox?
Not really, but I'm very lucky in that I have a partner who forces us to meal prep on a Sunday afternoon, and that has actually been like a game changer in terms of being organized, because I just grab something. And then I also carry a lot of things like biltong and a protein shake, a nice protein shake that I can just eat as I go. But it is challenging, and remembering to eat is quite kind of difficult
peak
sometimes.
Adulting, like you've unlocked the next level.
Next stage of adult.
When you meal prep, when you take a lunchbox.
100%. No, I must say this is literally in the last 10 months that I've been able to do this. Previously, it was just a lot of like convenient foods, ready to eat foods, which is actually a really good accommodation for a lot of people who, struggle to get there and make their own food and so on. It's taken 37 years of practice.
Yeah, it's always, we learn every day.
Yeah.
We learn
I'm still waiting to get the meal prep thing. Just Sunday comes and I'm just like,
I have
next
weeks
week.
where I'm like just like so good, and then life happens, of course,
absolutely.
and it stops you from being consistent.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, the only reason I'm able to do that meal prep is because I just provide the vibes in the kitchen.
Sure.
Like I bring the energy, and my partner's the one who's doing all the heavy labor. Like let's be honest, I can't lie. Yeah.
Got you. And now that we've snacked and yapped, let's get into a topic that we don't want to get cancelled for, because 100%. It seems as though anytime anyone chats about, GLP-1s, there's always some kind of controversy, some kind of backlash, whichever side of the fence you sit on, if there even is a fence, right? So I know with us, Steve, we really wanted to talk to someone who kind of has walked that journey, but also I'm just curious, just in terms of how people are navigating, whether they're using it or considering using it, and what life looks like for them in terms of how they shop and how they eat.
Yeah, and how I think these type of medications are changing those habits in a cultural sense and also, personally.
Now, Doc, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in terms of coming into medicine, because it was a little bit of an unusual path for you.
My original plan when I left high school was to be going to musical theatre. I wanted to be a lifetime member of the Rocky Horror Picture Show cast. Unfortunately,
which is like my favorite thing.
Thank you. That's such a great compliment.
But this is like pandemic level pivot.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And then through a very strange set of circumstances, driving home one night, I came across a car accident and I stopped to help. And that kind of really set things in motion, and I became a paramedic and was involved in emergency medicine for a very long time. And then it got to the point where my nervous system couldn't do emergency medicine anymore. And through my own growth and figuring out my own identity, I've now landed in a space where I run a GP practice, which is specifically looking at a lot of neurodivergent folks. I am one myself, and there are co-occurring conditions. And then also really having a safe space for discussions around sexual health, hormonal health, and metabolism for people who might have found it uncomfortable to talk about that before, or maybe have alternative lifestyles or different ways of doing things where they feel they need a space to not be judged. And so that's kind of like how I found where I am now.
Well, I think that's what's interesting, and I think that's probably why we're all a bit nervous, is because these conversations aren't normally had so openly and so freely. But what sparked this interest in hormonal and metabolic health?
It feels like a deeply personal decision too.
Yeah, it is. So, I was the person who, at the age of 13, was put on hormonal contraception because I had terrible acne and irregular periods. And that kind of started the journey of being diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is something that is very, very common amongst cis women. And it's often just kind of dismissed, or it has been in the past, and just been kind of treated without real discussions about how it affects people. And then as I got older and I realized all these things about myself, I became extremely anxious and was really struggling, and eventually found myself in a doctor's office, overwhelmed and not coping. And that was when I was diagnosed as both autistic and with ADHD. And that then sort of set those wheels in motion, and realizing that the doctor's advice or the things that were traditional that I was told just weren't working for me at all. And I thought there must be not necessarily an alternative or different way. I'm not really necessarily talking about alternative medicine, but really just about openly discussing these things. And I found more and more, especially when I went to GP practice, that people really responded to me disclosing my own difficulties. If I said, I tried this medication and I understand why you might be hesitant to try it. Some people have really bad side effects to medications. I do. And so being able to talk about those things, it meant that people were more likely to open up. And I think that's kind of where I've found myself now, where people feel like they can tell me things because I have been open about struggling with these things as well.
Which is not something that's common in terms of the doctor-patient relationship, or even the idea of, doctors being very close to, the work that they do on that personal level. Do you find that because you are so deeply connected to your work that it is almost easier to navigate, or do you find it has its challenges as well?
It has its challenges, as my therapist knows. I've had to really work very hard on my boundaries and things like that, because I was saying to my assistant yesterday, I have so many clients that I consider close clients or special clients because their stories resonate with me so deeply. And then I realize it's basically all of my clients and I can't have that. And I have to not feel, if a person is sitting across from me telling a story that feels very relatable, I can't be activated into trying to save them and fix them like how I would want to a friend or a family member. And I have to work really hard at remembering that my job really is to facilitate someone's own growth and own management. And I see my role as being the person who offers them information. So I always sort of tease my clients or joke to say, my job is to offer you the buffet. I have a buffet of options. I will tell you all of the information about them as much as I can. I will tell you all the science. I will also talk about my lived experience and others' lived experience when it comes to these things. And then it's their job to decide because they know their bodies the best. Bodily autonomy is my number one value. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, if we focus specifically on these GLP-1 medications, there's so much noise and fear-mongering around them at the moment. As someone who's got such an invested interest in them, what do you wish people understood about the science that would perhaps ease this panic that seems to be everywhere?
And I think I want to start off by saying I was also very skeptical about these medications. I started in general practice about 18 months ago. And the initial clients that were coming to me to ask for these medications, there was definitely an aspect of, body dysmorphia, people saying things like, I've gained 3 or 4 kilos and it's making me not confident. There's a lot of internalized weight stigma that I was seeing. And I thought, this seems harmful. I'm fully on board. But the beauty of science and real science is that we change our minds when presented with new evidence. And the evidence and the literature and the science that's coming out about these medications is kind of overwhelming, that they have very limited side effects and are very effective. One of the pervasive myths is that they are dangerous, I guess. So you would have heard things like they were causing blindness or causing pancreatitis or causing severe medical issues. And actually, if we look at the science, 12% of the population of the United States is on some form of these medications. It's millions and millions of people.
America's a lot of people. 12% is a big number.
And so essentially, if there were serious, dangerous side effects, we would definitely know about it. And most of the side effects that you see published in newspapers or in news articles are actually as a result of rapid weight loss, which we can see even in bariatric patients or patients doing extreme diets and things like that. So that kind of myth is really kind of debunked. They are very safe medications. The other myth, which is what I really wanted to talk about, but I can't remember. What was it? I would actually, you could tell me some of the myths that you've heard potentially.
For me, it was the side effects that perhaps we are not aware of now that could come into play years from now.
Oh, yes, yes, okay.
The dangers of the unknown, I guess.
Yes, all right, thank you. So one of the myths that's very common is that these are such new medications that we don't know how they're going to behave long term. So to us as South Africa, we think, these medications have only become available in the last sort of 2 to 3 years. How do I know that this isn't going to give me brain cancer in 25 years kind of thing. But actually, if you go and you read about the history of these medications, it's fascinating. They actually started investigating or researching these things after the Second World War, when diabetes started to become an issue. And we know food is political and diets are political and all those kind of things. But type 2 diabetes started rising after the Second World War, and we needed to try and fix it because insulin isn't really good at managing type 2 diabetes. And so these medications have been on the market and FDA approved by the United States since 2007. So there's a huge amount of data. And they first started being made in the 80s. So actually this isn't, science moves slowly. There's one thing that we know. If something is published or medication is available now, I promise you, there's a good 10 or 15 years of research, solid research that's happened in the background. And I think those are probably the myth that it's unsafe and the myth that it's new and we don't know much about it. Both of those are just not true.
And the myth that you have to be on them forever and that if not, you just...
Right, and I think that unfortunately is not a myth. And this is kind of where we go back to the physiology of obesity. And this is, where the conversation becomes complicated, where the pervasive idea is that someone who is overweight or carries too much body fat, it's because of a moral failing. It's because of a discipline issue. It's a societal issue. It's an environmental issue. And that's kind of been the message, that you need to sort yourself out. You need to stop eating so much. You need to exercise more. And now we really know that obesity is a physiological medical condition. Adipose tissue, which is the medical name for fat cells, is an endocrine organ. It secretes hormones that disrupt the rest of your body, that can cause mental health concerns, that can cause a lot of other medical conditions. And so now we actually need to think about it as a medical condition that requires treatment. And if your genetics have made you predisposed to having obesity, then you need medication to help you with that stuff. Exactly how if you had type 1 diabetes, your pancreas has an autoimmune condition which doesn't make insulin, and so you need insulin for the rest of your life. If you have been struggling with obesity your whole life, if you've always struggled with it, you will probably need a chronic medication to help you manage that. And so that's not a myth. Very often, a lot of clients have to stay on it for long term, just like you would have to for any chronic medical condition. There are options, and so you talk about two different types of patients. There's the patient that has an acute weight gain, maybe from a stressor, maybe from other medication that caused weight gain, and those patients can sometimes use it short term and come off successfully. But for the majority of the patients, if you've been struggling with your weight your whole life, you will be continuing to use this medication your whole life at a minimized dose. So we talk about maintenance doses, but that is potentially true for most people.
I think it kind of feeds into that question of when would you prescribe it rather?
Right.
And what does that decision look like? What is that moment that, we would recognize as, okay, it is time?
Yeah, and I think what I want to start off by saying is that this is an individual decision for every single person and their doctor. It's not, in medicine, we really, really try to stay away from black and white thinking. Everything is complex. We can hold multiple, truths at the same time. And essentially, the science says the indication for these medications is either type 2 diabetes, and now it's actually first-line treatment before oral medications like metformin. And the other is obesity, which would be defined as a BMI of more than 30. And we can talk about the validity of BMI. It's a very old way of talking about obesity. Essentially, people who have a waist circumference of more than 90 centimeters, I might be wrong totally on the exact numbers,
sure.
But someone who is struggling with their obesity, meaning the obesity is causing them to have medical conditions, it's causing them discomfort, it's causing them to not have a good quality of life. Those are the two patients that it's actually indicated for. What we are also seeing is off-label use. So off-label use of a medication just means a medication has some other effects, which is not what it's indicated for, but we're seeing it. So, for example, a good example of that is Viagra, for example. So Viagra was initially made to manage high blood pressure in someone's lungs, and then they found it also helped with erectile dysfunction. So that was initially off-label use. So now with these medications, off-label use, we're seeing a significant decrease in nicotine and alcohol use. So patients who struggle with alcohol and smoking, they're now able to give up those, which is obviously improving quality of life. Another thing that we're seeing is that these medications are profoundly anti-inflammatory. So patients who have chronic pain, chronic fatigue, full body autoimmune pain conditions like endometriosis are actually being managed by these. So we are going to see, it's going to be a hugely evolving landscape in the next sort of 2 to 3 years, how these medications are prescribed and who for.
And I mean, I've read and also listen to people who talk about this and say that this is the first time that they feel free around food. It's the first time they are able to celebrate food again. And some use the term food noise, which is something that they've struggled with for years. What are you seeing with your patients at your practice with regards to, that kind of conversation?
Yeah, and I mean, in the spirit of what I was talking about earlier, I think I should disclose that I am using these medications. So at a low dose, I'm using tirzepatide, which the brand name is Mounjaro. And the reason I bring it up is because of that exact reason. So I have always struggled with my weight as a result of my polycystic ovarian syndrome. I'm insulin resistant. I have a lot of thoughts just constantly around food. My appetite always just never seems to be satiated. And I'm very drawn to sugar, high sugar items. And as I was learning about these medications and I was helping my patients being prescribed with them, I noticed that with my anxiety, my food noise, which is essentially just constantly thinking about food, was getting worse and worse. And I would say to myself, all I need to do to be able to finish this email is have 6 cinnamon donuts, and then I'll be able to move on with my life. And it just wasn't sustainable. And I was carrying a lot of weight around my abdomen and my waist, which was making me very uncomfortable. And I'm in my late 30s. I'm heading towards perimenopause. We know that this time of life is associated with weight gain and insulin resistance. So I thought, you know what, let me try. I went to my doctor and I was prescribed it. And the day after I took my first injection, I went to Woolworths after work, peak time for when I would normally overeat or buy a lot of impulsive foods. Sure. 5 p.m., haven't eaten all day, probably quite tired and grumpy. And I went to the bakery section and I looked at my cinnamon donuts and I just thought, those bring no joy to me. The normal thing of looking at my food and thinking, I know I will feel better when I'm eating them. That wasn't there. It wasn't that I didn't have an appetite. I was still hungry. I went and I bought chicken and I bought some broccoli and my partner and I had a lovely meal that evening. But it just was like, I can see that those are lovely and I'm sure they taste nice, but they're not for me right now. And that's actually how the medication works. It works on your dopamine center in your hypothalamus when it comes to hedonic foods. So I don't know if you know the term hedonic foods at all.
Please explain.
Okay, so
I'm learning
this is very interesting.
Classes in session.
And I can. Unfortunately, I always talk about myself. I've monetized my special interest info dumping.
Sure.
So please feel free to interrupt me at any point.
You're at the right place.
Okay.
We're here for it.
We were built for this.
And so hedonic foods, if you think about it, I'm sure you all would have heard, if you've been at a restaurant and you're very full after dinner and then the waiter comes around with a sort of dessert platter and someone says, I'm so stuffed, but I'm sure I could fit in something. The dessert treat. Stomach, right?
Correct, yeah.
And the reason that works is because in our brains, we have a hedonic center, which means we are primed to see highly palatable, so normally high sugar, high fat foods and really crave them, because evolutionarily those foods would have been in very short supply and we would have wanted to eat as much of them as we could to preserve energy. And so those don't activate the same satiety centers as other food does. And so we can, overeat those foods very easily. And some people are more prone to that kind of impulsive eating and wanting to eat hedonic foods, and especially people with ADHD who are looking for sort of dopamine hits. And so that's hedonic food. And that's where these medications, it's one of the roles that these medications play, that they say, no, you don't need that dopamine, actually. You have enough. You are satiated. And this is where another one of the really interesting sort of side effects of this medication is improving executive functioning. So we're seeing in people with ADHD that these medications help with the other noise, not only food noise, but with concentration, with focus and things like that as well. So it's pretty interesting.
That is, yeah. And I mean, it sounds like it's as much a mental change as it is a physical change. That, I guess, it can almost feel like losing a coping mechanism. I've heard that from some people, that if, food was your comfort food, or your comfort mechanism rather,
yes,
it could feel like you've lost that.
And that's very interesting. And there was a lot of fear initially about that kind of thing, where we were seeing reports that patients who were put on these medications were suffering from depression or anxiety as a result, sort of a loss of interest and things like that. We can see that at very high doses, and that's why it's very important to be on these medications with a doctor who sort of can recognize these signs. But what we've found with patients with things like binge eating disorders or patients who like to overeat, comfort eat, I mean, I know, for example, even if I wasn't hungry, I could push past that lack of appetite to get food in because it would be so comforting. But when your dopamine is regulated, you don't actually miss that. So the majority of the patients who were struggling with overeating, they're not saying, oh, I'm anxious because I've lost my coping mechanism. It's just kind of like, oh, I don't need that coping mechanism anymore.
Is there a risk that they could replace it with something else?
So we haven't seen that in the literature. Like I said, with there's even for the drives with substances and so on is lower. But that is also why I recommend all my clients who are on these medications are in some form of therapy. So it doesn't have to be talk therapy. It can be somatic. It can be whatever speaks to you. But keeping an eye on those thoughts, and we haven't even gotten into the internalized weight stigma, the fat phobia of, everything around us. I can hold the conflicting thought of, I would like to be more comfortable in my body. I would like to be more healthy. I would like to lose weight. But also, I don't want to subscribe to diet culture. I don't want to be thin and take up less space.
And villainize certain body types.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that is why it's a very individual, decision about these things. But we haven't seen an increase in worse behavior, if that makes sense.
And I guess what's interesting there is that based on that conversation and that toxicity of diet culture, I think that a lot of people kind of feel like, okay, I'm taking medication, it's cheating.
Very much the conversation on social media, when people are open about it, the responses are predictable and they sound like that.
Especially celebrities now. Everyone's calling out these celebrities as if, they've done something terrible.
And I think a lot of that is entrenched in the history of weight loss medication. So weight loss medication has a terrible optic. We've all heard about people using ephedrine and, abusing ADHD medications and all these kind of things. The idea that a lot of weight loss specific medications had terrible side effects, to the point that actually some of these GLP-1 peptide medications were put on hold by pharmaceutical companies because they were like, don't want to be seen promoting medication for weight loss. It was a bad, point of view. And also you can see it in media where they say, oh, this person's obviously on Ozempic, they have Ozempic face and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
That's just what someone looks like when they lose weight. And so there is definitely this idea that if you're using it, it's bad, and that it's cheating. Let me tell you, as someone who has struggled with my weight the whole time, I have lost 30 kilos from doing very strict intermittent fasting and ketogenic. We could say that that's cheating as well. Essentially, what we need to say is that the physiology of people who gain weight easily, it is a medical condition, and you still have to eat healthily, exercise, look at your protein. You have to still look after yourself. You're just getting the same step up that someone who doesn't have obesity has. When I spoke to a friend of mine, and I said she had a screensaver on her laptop of cupcakes that she worked. And I said, how do you concentrate and get any work done with cupcakes in the background? Aren't you just constantly thinking about cupcakes? She looked at me like I was totally insane. She's like, no, it's just a pretty picture of cupcakes. Sure. And I was like, I wouldn't be able to concentrate on my work until I had eaten those cupcakes. And she had no clue of what I was talking about. And that's the difference. So someone who at a physiological, a cellular level, thinks about food in that way compared to someone isn't. The medication is just putting us essentially on a level playing field. It's not cheating, it's medication for a medical condition.
For a lot of people, their identity is tied to their size. It's tied to, how they look. How do you talk to your patients about separating self-worth from body size? Because it is holistic work that needs to happen here, especially in the context of GLP-1s.
So important in my practice, and I think in a lot of my colleagues, when someone comes in and they have various medical complaints, and I do see that they are overweight, I will never talk about weight loss or about their bodies without them inviting. So I will say, would you like to speak about your weight today? Or would you like to speak about your body? So that it is them initiating the conversation, the choice. I think that's very important. And there are some people whose answer is no. It's not important to them. The idea that you have to sort of force weight loss onto someone from a health perspective no one owes anybody a smaller body or health. They can choose for themselves. So that's very important. So many patients then, if they do want to speak about their weight or their bodies, are in very difficult places. They've tried everything. They're feeling very uncomfortable. They're worried maybe about their kids who, their weight is affecting their ability to be with their children. And then that's kind of where we start the conversation. And I've had some of my clients be quite ashamed about asking these medications. A very good client of mine said to me, she feels like a bad feminist, that the idea that we need to conform, that we need to be thinner, but you can, like I said, you can hold two truths. You can want better for yourself and for your body and to feel better, and you can also acknowledge that the pressure that we are all under, I'm 37, I grew up in the early thousands. It was not a good time to be a teenager.
We're the same age, and
yes.
It really does feel a bit like deja vu again.
Exactly.
Where this hyper-obsession with size, and especially skinniness and how we talk about, body types, I'm shuddering.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's terrifying. And I had found myself, before I started these medications, very fit. I was doing a lot of weight training. I was eating very healthily, but I was still in a bigger body. And I had just thought to myself, this is how I've learned to love myself. I'm very happy. I feel like I'm doing things, but there was still this element of this constant food noise, and that's kind of what drove me to it. But people can and should be allowed to exist in the body that they want to be. It's very important to me. And so the conversation really needs to be, why is it that you want to use these medications? What are you hoping it will bring for you? Let's have the difficult discussion. What is your relationship like with food? Do you have a history of eating disorders that we need to talk about? When you start to lose weight and you have these thoughts, like I just kept on having this thought that I would wake up one morning and I would have put on all the weight again, or worrying that my partner would find me more attractive when I was slimmer. And what if I put the weight on again and they didn't find me attractive anymore? These are the kind of thoughts that we're having because this is how we've been conditioned to think about ourselves. It's just a really nuanced, complex discussion. And these are the kind of discussions that you should be having with your healthcare provider if you're interested in these medications or think they're right for you.
Do you think that doctors should ever prescribe these meds in isolation? Or, it sounds like you're suggesting some form of conjunction with therapy or other forms of, self-care.
Absolutely. So this is not just like a plaster and then go kind of thing. What I always talk about is absolutely there needs to be some sort of therapeutic process, whatever works for you. So if it's a clinical psychologist or a counselor or dance, awake, breath, movement, whatever works for you. And then the other aspects of it is we need to talk about what you're eating and what you're doing with your body. And I try to use those words very specifically. I don't say diet and exercise because they've almost become like trigger words. And so I'm not talking about diet. I'm talking about, okay, what food are we going to put in our bodies? And the biggest one is, and I'm sure you guys know, the hot topic at the moment is of protein. So focusing on your meals, on getting in your protein first, as well as your fiber. One of the side effects very commonly with these medications is constipation. So we want to make sure that we get a lot of fiber in. And the reason I talk about that is because of the suppressed appetite, there is a danger that now the only thing you're eating is essentially unhealthy, quote unquote foods. I've had a friend tell me, I can wake up in the morning and just eat a croissant and then not eat anything all day. That is not what we want at all. We don't want rapid weight loss. We don't want you to be starving yourself. Essentially, you're going to be putting yourself in a malnourished state if you're doing that. So this is where the dosage of the medication needs to be right so that you can still eat a well-balanced diet, to use the word. And then the other big thing is strength training. Strength training. I will prescribe it for every single person who walks into my office.
Prescribe strength training.
Yes, I write it down and I say, you're going to go do this. And what I say is you're going to pick up heavy things and you're going to put them down again. That's all I want. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be jumping up and down doing burpees, which are the worst invention ever made.
Truly, there's no greater cause.
Are you a recovering CrossFitter?
I don't know, I would say recovering.
I'm still very much active. So.
Oh my God, okay.
What's the latest one?
Now?
High rocks or...
Goodness. Yes. All right. So I will say that high impact intensity training is not for everybody, but everyone should be picking up heavy things and putting them down again. And that is because the most important thing you can do, and it's been shown again and again in the literature for longevity, is to have big muscles. And that doesn't have to be according to gender or anything. We just want big muscles and strong bones, and lifting heavy things is what we do. And so to preserve lean muscle mass when you're on these medications, that's number one. That's what we want to do.
So what does like a truly supportive, like holistic care plan look like to you? Like who's involved? Is it dietitians, personal trainers, doctors, psychologists? What would you prescribe as, the ultimate kind of way to go about this?
So I think what you would look for, if I was a client and I wanted to go and talk about these medications, I would look for a good GP who has an interest or knows about these meds, some sort of therapeutic practitioner. A dietitian can definitely play a very important role. So especially when people are not sure, what does 30 grams of protein look like? What should my plate look like? What is a good fiber that works for me? Do I have a history of disordered eating that needs to be addressed? So that's really where a dietitian comes in as well. And then a good personal trainer, I guess. And I think this is also an important discussion that we haven't done, is the cost.
Yeah. The privilege of having access to all of these support systems. But I think something that we can all be aware of and kind of take advantage of in terms of this cultural moment is how we talk about body diversity with compassion, with care, which is probably what I'm proud of about the conversation that we're having now, because I think there's how we can relate to each other that we can take forward and be sensitive in how we speak about each other and to each other around body diversity. Are you finding that people are open to that challenge? We grew up in a time where, we saw, skinny bodies being, the shining example of health, for example, 20 years ago. And that seems to be coming back again, as opposed to different types of people exist in different types of bodies, and that's okay.
Yeah. I don't know if that is changing. It's so difficult. What I will note is that when I lost a bit of weight now over the last 6 months, it used to be when I was a teenager, everyone was constantly commenting on your body. So if you'd lost weight, it would be like, everyone is looking at you now, making comments, and it would be quite normal. Like, it was very normalized. In this time, not one person has said anything to me. And it was actually really interesting, because part of me was going, why is no one complimenting me? But there was...
Very millennial of you.
Exactly, yes. And I was like, is it all in my head? Oh, no. And so there is, I have that kind of experience where that has changed. And also that it seems to be a lot more acceptable for people to exist in other bodies. I know I might be in my own sort of queer silo where that's very common, but there is nothing like you can't wear a crop top unless you have a flat tummy. You just wear whatever you want. Yes, I almost saw there. Wear whatever you want. And also, if you would like to change your body, please do that, and do it for yourself. It's, that's an important thing. When I started strength training, I was very unhappy with my body and very, struggling with a lot of insecurity, even mentally. And I started picking up weights and building muscle and feeling strong. And it was the best decision I've ever made. And so it wasn't, even now, was never the weight loss or using Manjaro was never about becoming smaller or changing who I was. It was helping me feel the best that I had ever been. Yeah.
Do you think there is hope around, shift in society in terms of how we talk about this? I don't want kind of these cycles to just keep coming back, and us harming each other in terms of how we talk about one another. Do you think there is hope down the line in our lifetime?
I don't think that I would be able to get out of bed every day if I didn't think that there was hope. I think that the more the society, things are changing around us, everything that is looking very scary, if you are a progressive, liberal-minded person who believes in the sanctity of bodily autonomy and human rights and choice, we have to have hope. Living in the modern age is a very, very difficult time for us. So yes, I think we should have hope. Yeah.
And I mean, just from a food perspective, as someone who eats out a lot in restaurants and my entire life involves food, do you see patients discover new food preferences or healthier routines because they're on the medication?
Absolutely, yes. So again, is that less of the impulsive buy, less of a reaching for whatever is there. The food psychologists have really kind of robbed or, really hijacked our minds in that way. There's a certain triangular chip product, which is highly palatable, high fat content, high salt. You can eat those all day without stopping. And I think we are potentially, as a result of these medications, seeing people move away from that and more towards actually what fuels my body, what makes me feel good the next day. Those of us on these medications will notice if you've overdone it on those kind of foods, even with alcohol, you will notice in your body that you have a little bit, you feel a bit unwell the next day. And so, yes, I do think that people seem to be able to stick with more consistently healthy foods.
It is changing the way they listen to their bodies in a way.
Absolutely.
Something that I've heard that comes up quite often is that you should never shop while hungry, shop for food while hungry. Is there truth in that? Do we make poorer choices when we're hungry?
Oh gosh, I'm sure there is a wonderful neuroscience way of understanding that, and I think the answer is almost certainly yes.
Yeah.
You're far more likely to make impulsive decisions when your insulin is low and you're super hungry and you need some serotonin and dopamine. Definitely, yeah.
Wow. That has been a super fascinating conversation, Sibs.
Yeah, no, I could talk to you for hours.
We could carry on.
Really am grateful that you were able to share with us not only your personal story and stories around your patients, but just in terms of the research that's out there that I think a lot more people need to kind of delve into if this is something that you are interested in, but also speaking to a professional, speaking to your doctor, and then proceeding from there. Doc, we have a segment called Cold Seat where we will bring in someone from Woolies to answer hard-hitting questions. Don't hold back. It feels like you're someone who gets right into the meat of things.
Never held back in my life.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. So we've spoken a lot about these meds at an individual and personal level, but we're also curious about what happens when you zoom out.
Absolutely. Luckily, we know just the person. It's Woolies head of product, Marli Roberts.
And she does not come empty-handed.
We heard you like to lift up heavy things and put them down.
Thank you.
So the Woolies gift bag.
It is heavy. Sounds very cool. Thank you very much.
Some lovely treats in there. Hi, Marli, welcome. What I found working with Woolies is that I literally don't know what anyone does. It sounds great, but please explain your role in the business.
I sometimes wonder myself what I do. We do a little bit of everything, but I am in a very fortunate position to currently be heading up a central innovation centre. So we set quality standards for our food products. I've got a team of very, very talented chefs doing R&D and development work. We take trends and we translate that into products to resolve needs for our customers, and very often, hopefully, those that they've not realised they need yet. It's a wonderful, innovative space to be. It is a delicious space to be in, and I think ultimately we would like to make the lives easier for our customers every day.
You basically know what we need before we do.
We believe that.
Yeah. Well, before we put you in the cold seat, I believe you've got a cold seat question for Dr. Robyn.
Yeah, I've always wondered if you can determine somebody's health status by simply looking at them, whether they're skinny or overweight. Doesn't that make you healthy or unhealthy purely by...
Sure. And that's obviously, that's a very complex question. And I think an important part of being a doctor is being able to evaluate only the person in front of you and not making, broad statements about people. I think there's a few ways that I could answer that question. Firstly, by saying, no, I don't think that you can. I don't think that you can tell someone's health status by just what they look like or exactly what their weight is. Part of the reason is that we've now seen that certain body shapes, for example, if you are someone who keeps fat on your your bum and your thighs, that is associated actually with longevity in comparison to someone who keeps weight around their tummy, which is unfortunately more associated with cardiovascular disease risk. So just because you carry some extra body fat doesn't mean that you are essentially unhealthy. It is a difficult question to answer, but every person should be looked at on their own, I think, yeah.
So as we've been discussing, we're obviously talking about GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, and we were just wondering if if you believe they're going to be changing the way that people shop and eat on a global scale.
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey trying to track how customers' behaviors are shifting. And we've seen early indications of data coming through that what people put in their basket is changing. So their selection of food, the amount of food they buy at a certain time has shifted. In America, who are renowned for very large, big portions, are now adding smaller portions onto their menus. Just the other day on social media, there was this picture of tiny mini burgers, big pieces of protein in there, but a few pieces of chips and some tomato sauce on the side. So quite a big shift, I think, from where they were with opulent plates of food. It's also, I think, linked to wastage. So there is the choices that I can make and how much I can or want to eat at a certain point in time. And then there's what do I eat or what do I select when I eat. Building on this high protein, I think it's like a whole evolution that's happened about understanding what is the protein that I eat, how much protein are in a meal, and how do you help customers just navigate that in an easier way. And I think there's early indications in the UK as well that they are shifting how they are making on-pack recommendations. Legally, there's a whole lot of considerations what you can and can't do, and it differs from nation to nation. So that makes it quite hard for customers seeing something when they are, for instance, in the UK and expecting something similar in South Africa, but we are legally not allowed to call out certain things. But it's around helping customers, making sure that they can make nutritionally sound choices. So making sure that we understand what fiber content in food is, what is the protein content, and making sure it's good proteins as well.
Yeah, and so from Woolies' point of view, have you found yourselves adjusting your strategy in order to offer your customers, what you find they are kind of needing, or in response to this trend? Are you seeing that you kind of have to, work through that kind of changing landscape?
So I think it's under investigation. Woolworths wants to has this aspiration to be the most responsible retailer in the world. Mm-hmm. But that also is linked, our wellbeing strategy is linked to that. And our wellbeing strategy is really around good food choices. So good food choices for me and my family, good food choices for animals and planet, and good food choices for our communities. And linked to that is food choices that's based around nutrition. Then there's lifestyle, good food choices that supports lifestyle, and then good food choices that support dietary requirements. And our customers are diverse. So it will never be a very specific strategy that will be, I suppose, known as a GLP-1 strategy. Yeah. It's around how are we responsible and how we show up with the products we put on our shelves. I think that indications are also that there's certain categories where we should be more aware of it, in the beverages space, in the snacking space, and then in the prepared meal space. So what does your meal composition look like? Slightly less starches perhaps, more proteins, and making sure that those fibers that you have in there, those salads that in there, it's just good, wholesome meals.
And Dr. Robyn, itching to ask a cold seat question?
I'm interested to know, you're working with food all the time and seeing what the trends are. Does that change your own approach to your diet? Do you also feel like you have quite a complicated relationship with food? And does your job, have an impact on that at all?
I just have a complicated relationship with food, I think. But I think there's for me, and I think not only for me, if you start in a world of product development, I started off as a chef. So just really bad habits of eating and not eating, and when you eat, and just really bad habits, and habits that did not support a healthy lifestyle. Then I moved into a space where I got involved in product development, where we continuously are tasting and evaluating food, whether that is to make sure the quality is at the right level, whether it's at making sure as we go through this product development process, we continuously checking against the characteristics that we think these dishes should have. So you eat. I had to learn a few coping mechanisms in that. We don't swallow everything. It is okay to spit food.
Sure.
And growing up in an era where
what does a food spittoon look like? Is it just kind of off to the side? Don't look at me.
Well, I had to go through COVID where we were evaluating food at home to get comfortable with spitting because then no one was watching me.
Oh, wow.
It's not elegant. It's terrible, and you hope that the person sitting next to you is close their cup. It's not. No, it's things like that. So you learn, and certain foods are easier to spit than others. If you evaluate moose, there's nothing left to spit, So, and it's the reality. You need to find ways to cope and deal with it. And I think there is potential that there are also a lot of people that have developed really bad habits.
I was going to say
because of the industry, but we advocate healthy eating before you taste.
Sure.
Because you taste differently. Making sure that you're okay to spit. It's the same. I mean, I think if you're in the wine industry, it's exactly the same thing. And it's just with food, there's guilt that comes with waste. And spitting is, for me, I was always taught, how can I spit? It's waste.
That's so interesting because my initial thought was, wow, the idea of spitting your food out feels so disordered to me. It feels so pathological. But with that analogy of alcohol, it was like, well, if you were drinking all the alcohol, that would also be pathological. It's just kind of, it's so easy to have these feelings come up when we're talking about food.
Sure.
Yeah.
So hopefully we continue to entice customers. We continue to help them on this journey to make better food choices, and we provide them with those options and options that they continue to enjoy, and we make it easier for our customers. I think ultimately that's what we want to do.
Thank you, Marli. Thank you for your transparency, both in terms of what you do professionally, but also what you go through personally, which I think has been the humanity of this episode, even from you, Dr. Robyn. Thank you for your vulnerability as well. Probably every day, you've got to practice showing up and sharing your story, and we're very grateful that you came and spoke to us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it was a really approachable, thoughtful, vulnerable episode. So I thank all of you for that. I think it was, I'm a lot less anxious now than when we began.
Exactly. And that's been another insightful episode of What's the Difference, a Woolworths podcast.
We'll be back next week with another episode of What's the Difference. Until then, take care of yourself. If you feel like you need support, the SADAG website has a list of free resources. Please visit www.sadag.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts.
Until next time, we love you. Mwah. Bye-bye.
Bye.